The next song has longs in the title. So we had the longing lungs at the beginning. Everyone longs for a Saturday. And I feel like there is a longing in that song, as part of what that song is reflecting on, is this longing for life to be experienced as divine. There's a lyric about holding out for something divine, but then at another moment, when we are delicately pre-designing the way in which we're going to be interacting, it's as if it was something divine. So it flows nicely from the previous conversation, because there can be these times where there are tried and tested ways of like making something beautiful, and it's like, okay, I'm going to use that tried and tested way. Here's my beautiful moment. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it's evident that I've planned it. There's this contrast between planning and praying in the song too. You always pray for a rainy day, and I always plan for the snow.
It's just this didactic of planning versus praying.
Totally.
And I think it's particularly in our national discourse right now about those who would prefer to try and plan or make adjustments or rules to put in place to prevent tragedy from occurring, and others who, might try and take a spiritual route to hoping that these things don't happen again. Again, this song is about sort of these teens who are sort of at odds with each other. Maybe they're good friends, but they just have, opposite ideas about the world, whether it's prayer versus a more analytical approach to something, or a more planned approach. And the characters in the song are sort of like hormonal teens. And I'm realizing now, speaking about this, sort of that through line through a lot of these, like, kind of like young testosterone-filled people, or hormonal people who are trying to figure it out. And me as an adult kind of looking back and being like, I think these are captivating characters.
Yeah, they are. Characters for whom a lot is happening all at once.
Yes, exactly. And so I think that particular song is just an acknowledgement of sort of the two sides of the coin, of praying for something and trying to leave something up to the spiritually divine, and those who are saying, well, but we should also be taking measures to ensure that we are successful, or that bad things won't happen. And it's just an idea of, seeing how these people interact as young people. And then in the final verse, it kind of talks about them encountering each other as adults, sort of on the street and around the Christmas holiday. And sort of seeing where they ended up. One of them is singing in kind of a Christmas choir, and the other one is passing them on the street, and sort of just acknowledging that, oh, you're still that way.
So the way in which they are is, in contrast with the unrefined altos and tenors, you were the only soprano. And for me, I feel like that concrete image at the end grounds this otherwise kind of abstract conversation that we're having, and the song is inviting us to have, about praying versus planning. Because this specific human has become a refined soprano. They've committed to the craft.
It's an ironic thing, right? I think that's a thoughtful reading of that. I think that in the choruses of the song, oftentimes where it's talking about the world being fake, nothing is real. We're all just kind of taking part in a world of false narratives and things like that.
Watching it from the sides, not in the arena.
Exactly. And then the final verse is, don't you know everything's fake, and it's watering down the brine. We're watering down the human experience that we all feel. And everything, I'm trying to remember what it is, but it's something along the lines of, the stuff that's most important in life, that we take in life, is what's most hard to understand. It's what's most difficult to comprehend. Did I kind of paraphrase that correctly?
Yes, and all that I've learned from mistakes is what's cripplingly hard to define.
Thank you, yes. And so I just think it's kind of this song is a little less narrative. It's more of just kind of a character study on two people who are just sort of opposed but are fond of each other. They're just, maybe they grew up together, maybe they were boyfriend and girlfriend or in a relationship with each other when they were teens, but also, going their own ways down their own correct paths, one would say, and being okay with the other person having a different opinion.
Different ways of being.
Yeah, maybe growing apart, but still being fond for that person.
Yeah, appreciating.
Yeah, I think that's true.
The way of being, yeah. So, and this is inviting more reflection, I think, on the songcraft, because the song itself is concerning how much pre-designing to do, and how much to kind of relinquish control. And there's an appreciation. One of the characters seems to be very appreciative of like the experience of the divine that happens when we relinquish control.
Yeah.
And then the other seems to be more appreciative of this commitment to editing and crafting something beautiful.
I think both sides.
How does that play out in the way in which the song is crafted?
It's a great question. I think that songwriting is, I was talking to a friend about this recently, how like a large part of it, like for instance, when you're writing with a checkbox, like I felt like I had started to do, is not creative. Hmm? It's almost like you're doing, I mean, this isn't the right word to use because it's almost like you're doing a sculpture. And I do believe that sculpture is a creative endeavor, but it's more like I need this and I'm going to put it here, and I need this and I'm going to put it here. And do those two kind of go nice together? No, let's put this here instead. And that's creative, I guess, but it's not divine. It's more of a analytical process of taking things and kind of moving them around on the plate.
Yeah, which clearly has a role in your songcraft.
It's a bit important part.
But
then there's this other part that is fully divine, which we say, who knows where it comes from?
Yeah.
Why is this melody in my head? Because when you open yourself up to be a receiver for certain creative things, you start to receive creative ideas.
Yes.
And I'm sure you have ideas on that as well and thoughts on that as well. But to me, that's
themes that were brought up in the artist's way, where according to Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way, there is this sensor part within us, and to be creative, we need to find ways to get beyond this sensor part. But obviously, this sensor part helps us to, once we get beyond the first draft, or we have our song after we've written it for the songwriting challenge, but then we want to kind of have the song evolve and grow.
Yeah.
Then there's something like that sensor part needs to be collaborated with.
Exactly. Or, I grew up with a lot of friends who are musicians who are sort of like in the punk rock school, where it was like, you don't have to have skills, you don't have to have any technical know-how, you just have to be able to emote, which is cool as hell. Like, I think that's really cool. But for me, I feel most productive in like I'm creating the art that is most true to my vision and what I want to be doing when I get an idea, when inspiration strikes, I have the tools and the vernacular in front of me to execute. And that's where it kind of crosses over from being an art into a science. Because if I'm receiving these ideas, if I'm receiving concepts in my brain via art or literature or listening to their music or whatever, if I'm pulling that in, what do I do with those feelings? It's only as good as the tools I have in place to put them on the canvas with.
Certainly.
And so I think there is a constant conversation in art and in songwriting where it is, how much of it should be, how much science should we bring into it? How much planning can you put into it?
And craftsmanship.
And craftsmanship. Yeah. I don't know, but I think it's an interesting sort of like illustrative way of looking at the two sides of it. They're two characters. They're two people that need to find a way to get along, and they respect each other. And when they're great, but they're not. They're very different people.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of what that song speaks to. And then in the verse, or the bridge, where Molly and Emily are singing "How long," and then I say "longer than I had intended to." What that's sort of speaking to is, I find myself as an adult thinking about these things, from my past a lot, and I feel like I think about my formative years more than most people think about their formative years. And what I'm asking myself there is, how long am I going to be dwelling in these things? And then I'm saying longer than I had intended to.
Yeah.
But it's not a judgment.
To a bit,
yeah. I mean,
because there's value in it.
There's value in it. And I get a lot out of self-reflection.
Yes.
I get a lot out of remembering my mistakes and remembering times when I maybe didn't treat people as well as I should have. Because I think it makes me, I always just want to be like aware of my mistakes so that I'm careful not to repeat them. And that's not a unique thing to me, but I think I am dwelling on it maybe more frequently than others. Maybe it's just like a byproduct of whatever, having a neuroses or something. But I think that's sort of what that part of the song is about.
And it doesn't apply just to mistakes, but just to be aware, there's this way of being, there's this habit that I have. Let's see what happens to me and what I produce, whether it's my art or my actions, if I consciously shift to these habits, you do with here's the challenge for this songwriter's challenge set.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to have this, these different parameters within which I'm going to be practicing the craft and see what comes about if I intentionally change the pattern. I
think intentionality is a huge thing, and in songwriting and in relationships and in, anything really. And it doesn't always make things easier, but it will almost always prevent a regrettable experience.
But here we have the combination of conscious intentionality with awareness of, for better or worse, what the default is.
Yeah.
This is the pattern that I've been following in songwriting or in life.
Yeah.
And okay, now I'm going to I'm not going to resist that. I'm not going to make it good or bad, but I'm going to change it, see what happens.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. How that's
changing variables.
Yeah.
And doing it thoughtfully.
Yeah.
And not doing not changing the variables all at once. As they say, right?
Because that messes up the experiment.
It messes up the experiment.
Yeah.
And it waters down the brine, so to speak. It's sort of all part of the same soup of a lot of the topics in these songs are sort of kind of hop between one and another. Even in the second song, How We've Changed, there's a line where it says, there's a line where it talks about the roadways that hum. And that was clearly like a line acknowledging highways that vibrate. And so I kind of like to add these through lines from song to song that maybe leapfrog the next song but jump into the song after that. Or I just think that makes for kind of an interesting, rich listening experience when you kind of get down to the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, we do that right now with Longing being in the title for another song.
Yep, exactly.
Someone Longing. And for me, I feel like this is the continuity between the last song and this song is that there's this focus on connection. At the center, there's this image of postcard writing. Every postcard is written by someone longing that you were there too. So there's this emphasis on the connection, so that we have the continuity with there being connection between those two characters in the previous song, despite the differences.
The thing about this song in particular, I think, is I kind of wrote it with the idea of it being about being a millennial, because I think in a lot of people's eyes, millennials are sort of this, and I'm a millennial.
Yes.
There's sort of this generation that's willing to take care of themselves in a way, or willing to not necessarily jump into the machine of the real world, and maybe are a little bit softer than previous generations, and maybe are overeducated, underemployed type people, you know what I mean? And so the visual in this song that I go back to a lot is there's the first line of the first chorus is like a butter knife falling through margarine.
Yeah.
That's a tool that's too good for what it's being used for, so to speak, right? Because butter is the pure, essential, the natural, nice version of margarine, which is sort of the synthetic, fake version of it. So you've got a butter knife It's a tool that's intended to cut through butter being used to cut through margarine.
Yeah,
it's falling through the margarine.
Like this refined soprano. Maybe there's ways in which there's kind of mundane, the mundanity of their situation.
Yes.
With all of that effort cultivating their craft.
Totally. And so the song is sort of like it's got a lot of metaphors in it. It's not a particularly straightforward song, but I really like the visuals of it, and I like how it sort of pushes this notion of, like, it's okay to be someone who takes care of yourself, and it's okay to feel upset that you incurred all this student debt and went to college and you were kind of felt like you were thrown to the wolves when you went out into a job market that wasn't looking to hire people who fit your background, and even though you were told to do these things to become employable and to live a happy life. And it's okay to be angry about that. It's okay to feel depressed about it. It's okay to lean on your family for support. It's okay to take time off to be, someone who takes care of themselves. These are sort of the visuals I was thinking of when I was coming up with these metaphors of like a laundry line left out and weathered. That creates an image of something that has been sort of left to rot outside, like a chicken that's sent off to stew. It's something that's kind of been thrown to the wolves. It was raised to be put into the machine, essentially. Like a blister created by friction. I think the friction it sort of speaks to the notion of, go to college, take out loans, then you'll get a job and you'll pay for those loans, but you'll be able to then buy a house. And then, there's a friction between what you're told and what is actual.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, a lot of these things have come to a head for the millennial generation. When I was, like I said, these things have kind of happened all at once. We've had, huge economic downturns in our adulthood already. We've had a pandemic already. I just think these things that my parents and people of my parents' generation didn't experience until they were in their 50s or 60s or whatever. We've experienced a lot of it from the times we were, freshmen in high school and 9/11 occurred. And now I'm in my mid-30s and, we're experiencing a pandemic, and we've had, the Great Recession and just things like that. I think that I'm taking I don't think this song is a poor, poor, pitiful us type song. I think it's an acknowledgement that, like, it's not always easy, and it's okay to be upset about that. And it's okay that our adulthood has sort of been all consumed by these, like, pretty negative things that have occurred. We haven't been the luckiest in terms of the time in which we are supposed to be kind of taking over the world as a generation.
Yeah, very interesting. And again, kind of the sense of, like, honing something, but then for what?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I think being a high quality tool that was designed for a purpose and then using that tool for a much lesser purpose is just sort of a fascinating microcosm of the millennial experience.
Very interesting.
If that makes sense. That was the idea.
Yeah, very interesting. And then that flows nicely into everyone is a failure.
Yeah.
And I love how kind of chirpy everyone is a failure is, in a way, because everyone is a failure, everybody fails.
Yeah.
And it's true, everybody fails. And
Exactly.
this is a Brené Brown thing too, the idea that we were talking about Brené Brown before the interview.
Yeah.
If we show up, if we have a commitment to showing up, then that is a commitment to falling and to failing.
Yeah.
Because, if you show up, there's going to be times when it doesn't go the way that we intend it to.
Exactly.
So just a few lyrics that really kind of speak to me here. Everybody wanting to be canonized.
Yeah.
So again, like honing the craft, ready to create the great work.
Yeah.
To then be remembered by everyone and to be recognized and seen for exercising the skills that one's been cultivating.
Yeah.
So there's this desire. This is at least there's different ways in which humans desire that. At least we all want to be seen, and we all want to be seen for doing something that is meaningful for us, that fits with our sense of self.
Yeah.
So there is a sense in which everyone wants to be canonized. What reflections does the record offer on that tendency that we have?
I think this song, if anything, it's a little bit of like a blunt object, because the first line is, "I'm chewing on my inhaler." Everybody
pretends they're hypnotized when everyone is a stranger. Every conversation is improvised.
Yes. So I think that there's a thread to be brought from the first line of the entire record, but feeding my longing lungs. And that's sort of setting the tone for this person in thought. Someone sitting there trying to be mindful of their environment. This song is, "I'm chewing on my inhaler," which I think evokes images of lungs and breathing, right? And I think this song is, again, someone just sort of thinking about, maybe it's the same character from the first song, sitting there evaluating what it means to be a successful person. Because I don't know anybody, even the most fortunate, privileged people in the world who I've encountered or seen or whatever, who hasn't experienced some form of mishap or tragedy or whatever. Everyone has their missteps. And it's a little bit blunt. It's a little bit blunt way of saying it. I just think I don't know if I feel that there are really, if there's much subtext to this song, so much as it's just sort of like, hey, it's an acknowledgement that everybody fails.
Yeah. And the song, I think, in the way it sounds, I said it was kind of it's more chirpy than we would expect that to
Does
be
it feel sarcastic to you?
And it doesn't seem sarcastic to me. No. It seems like we could choose to be all tragic about this, but the song is presenting some alternative to it. Maybe there's irony and humor. Irony is a word that comes up in a few songs.
Yes.
But also, there's all kinds of other takes that we could have on this truth that everybody fails.
Yeah.
Besides the obvious making a tragedy of it.
Totally. Oftentimes, I haven't done it in a while, but it used to be when I would play this song live, I would introduce it as a children's song. Because I think it is kind of chirpy, like you said. It's got like a little bit of like a silliness to it, which I like. I like that it kind of rises up out of the maybe kind of like everyone wants for a Saturday, sort of like slow, 3-4 time signature, kind of like whatever. And this song kind of rises up and sort of acts as like a call and response between like the girl voices, almost like a girl group kind of vibe.
Totally.
And it's fun and it's upbeat and it's sort of just blatantly, this is what it is. Everyone's fails.
Right.
And we're going to laugh about it. It's okay.
Totally. Yes.
I think as a parent, I want to instill in my kid that like it's okay to screw up. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not do those things. And I just think having a song in which we just say that and it's okay.
Yeah.
You were talking...
Human Condition 101.
Yeah, totally. I was recently watching your episode with Lang from Humans.
Yes. Yeah.
And you had talked to Lang about, on his record, and I really like Lang, by the way, and I like his band a lot. He used phrases like everyone and everybody a lot on his record. And
these generalizations or universal statements.
Universal statements, right?
About the human condition, yeah.
Totally. And my mom always, I'm generalizing, my mom would frequently be upset if I said like, everyone at school is doing X, why can't I? And she's like, not everyone is doing it. Some people are doing it. Not everybody. You could be one of the people that isn't doing it, right? And so to this day, if I make some statement like that, she'll still correct me and say, no, not everyone, not everybody.
Not everybody.
Which is a really, right. And so I think it's fun for me to sort of play with the notion of everybody, everyone, everything.
Yeah.
in these statements like that, maybe as an elbow to my mom.
Sure. But in this instance,
it's true, right?
Yeah.
Everybody fails.
Everybody fails.
You're right. And so I think that this song is sort of fun. It's playful. I am sort of making a grand statement, but I do feel it's true.
Yes, exactly.
And there's not a ton of stuff.
Universalizing.
You just have to think of what's the thing that no one does right, and it's not fail, right? So
yes.
I guess there we go. But I don't feel like there's much undertone to this one. It's literally just everyone fails because some people don't acknowledge that. Some people...
There's all kinds of reasons not to.
Right, exactly. Some people like to keep up appearances and act like they haven't failed. And I think that it's okay to acknowledge that you have failed. You have taken wrong steps or wrong turns or whatever, and that's okay.
Yeah, back to the idea of there's an option to acknowledge that everybody fails, including oneself, and then to consciously, knowingly be in on the "oh how we've changed" tribe, because we experience what appears to be failure, and then we adapt.
Yeah.
And then oh how we've changed.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's these like kind of ideas of self-reflection and self-awareness are sort of a big part of all these songs.
Yeah.
And you nailed it. I mean, changing versus acknowledging failure, wanting to get better, wanting to acknowledge that it's okay to be depressed about certain things. It's okay to realize that people, adults as they raise kids or take jobs or move to certain towns or whatever, do things for reasons, not just to piss off their teenagers or to put their kids in situations that their kids aren't happy about or whatever. I
Back
think
to the complexity beyond the original stories that we tell ourselves about what's happening.
Yeah, I think there's complexity in everything, and there's nuance in everything. And I think if there's one sort of one seed throughout all this, it's that there's nuance in everything, and it's like an acknowledgement of nuance in acknowledging change and evolution and growth is it. That's kind of, I think, what I wanted to pair all these songs together for.
Totally.